Happy Friday! I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, and I'm back once again to make fun of AWS. It looks like they're doing a day on and a day off for a bunch of releases, and today's been pretty quiet. They released something called, Amazon Preymaker, P-R-E-Y. So yeah, the company that winds up effectively scaring the living hell out of everyone that holds still long enough is now going to help turn other companies into prey. The only thing that would make it worse is if it was a startup incubator. Now, before we continue, I'm offering something that I've dropped a URL into the chat and will soon be below my face. If you visit this URL, last week in aws.com/mug, you can get a very special mug. It gets you access to an event, and it's made of the steel from reclaimed servers, because serverless runs on servers is a lie. Now that everything's serverless, we don't have servers anymore, and we repurpose them into ham-bone mugs. That's right. Of course, all proceeds continue to benefit 826 National to help the youth of today learn to write creatively. Now, speaking of large, ancient steel servers that we don't need anymore, let's talk about what AWS has released this week through a lens of telco. To that end, I've asked my friend, Danielle DR, as they call it, from TelcoDR, to come and talk with me about what the heck this means for companies that are, how do we put this, not SaaS driven so much as actually powering the infrastructure makes all this work. Hi. You are muted. One more time. There we go.
Awesome. Hi, how are you guys?
Not dead yet. So what have you seen? What's exciting? What's useful for the telco industry to be aware of? I understand that telco doesn't quite move at the same rate of Twitter for Pets that wrote some amazing code last night and is throwing into production this morning because, you know, people actually care if their service works. You don't pick up the phone, back when we had such things in our house, and wonder if the dial tone is going to be there. We take it for granted. It's a utility. From that perspective, what are we seeing?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a little bit of a perspective that telco does move very slowly. So that industry, when I go and talk to different companies, different CTOs, they're still running things on bare metal in their own data centers, kind of old school. It's like 1995 in telco. So what I do as I sort of self-branded myself as the leading evangelist of the public cloud in telecom, very specific branding there. But I'm pretty much the only one that talks about public cloud in telco. And so what I'm trying to do is convince them to move as quickly and fast to the public cloud because there's all these amazing benefits. And so the things that I'm always looking for when AWS does their big events and does all their announcements, I think the chipsets that are coming out are really awesome. I think Andy Jassy's smackdown on the database vendors is always super fun and relevant for telco. I'm probably the only person that loved the Connect stuff and then all the wavelength stuff, the edge stuff.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack right there. Let's begin with chips, and we're seeing this across the industry now. It's gotten to a point where Intel Inside can widely be considered less a marketing campaign and more of a warning label. We've seen that there have been a number of roadmap misses where Intel has failed to deliver what they promised. Apple got annoyed and did their own silicon thing, and now AWS has done the same thing. Now, AWS, of course, is specializing in spending a lot of money to build amazing chips and give them crappy names like Trainium. Yeah. But more to the point of general purpose computing, we're seeing a lot of stuff like Graviton2. What does that mean for telco, who, as you say, have been slow to embrace public cloud? How do you wind up, I guess, first, not just moving in a cloudy direction, but beyond that, hey, also, we're going to change processor architecture on basically everything you've built. It seems like a heavy lift.
Yeah, I mean, mostly, I talk to CTOs and really CFOs at a very high level in terms of comparing it to the decisions that they're making every day around the cloud, right? They are deciding to build their own data centers, stay in their own data centers, and I'm making a very economic, right, back to what you do every day, push on realize the advantages of building flexible software that can move chipset architectures pretty quickly, right, from a software application perspective, and put yourself in position to take advantage of that. They buy hardware that they have lying around for 3 or 5 years. They want to get full utility out of those servers in their data centers. And then compare that to the public cloud, where you can just with a keystroke change the servers that you're running on. I mean, I'm kind of dramatically simplifying it, but at the base case, that's what it is, right? Put a little bit of effort and move your workloads around, and you get a 40% price performance improvement, and you didn't have to procure a server, unbox it, set it up, have the fights with finance to buy it. And it's keystrokes. It's huge.
So incidentally, in case people are wondering, we are live, so feel free to ask questions in the Twitch chat, and I'm thrilled to wind up taking the polite ones there. Someone observed that I love my own jokes. Yes, I do. I'm my own best audience. I laugh at all of them. You folks are basically lukewarm at best on some of them. So you talk about the other thing, databases, where what I love is watching every year, like, I used to think I was anti-Microsoft back in my days of Linux warriorism, and then I saw that, oh, there's no future in this. Turns out I could have been an Amazon exec, and it would have been just fine smacking at Microsoft. I just assumed they didn't pay their partner fee memberships. But they've gone after them in a bunch of different ways. This year's approach is apparently to look at Babelfish, of translating Microsoft SQL into Postgres, or PostgreSQL, or PostgreSQL is my preferred pronunciation. This has been tried before. You have these idea of, there's going to be a translation layer between them. And it's great, but it didn't work. Is it different this time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love your jokes, and sometimes your own jokes are the funniest. So I'm over here cracking up. I don't know about everyone else just being bummers in the Twitch stream, but we're just having a fun time. When I told my kids that I was going to be on Twitch after they groaned and said, "You're going to embarrass us, Mom," we're having a good time here. So forever, Oracle's been the big baddie around databases, horrible to do business with. Once they get their hooks into you, all they do is crank up the price. And as I fly around the world, less so in these COVID times, but previously when I would fly around, people would pull me aside. CTOs would pull me aside and say, what can you do to help me get Oracle out of our business? And, sort of everyone's gone after the Oracle spend. We can see what those guys are doing to fight to maintain their relevance in the new cloud world. But to watch Andy Jassy really go after Microsoft and SQL Server was astonishing. And I think the big win for Telco is these guys spend hundreds of millions of dollars on databases. And to be able to abstract that layer out in their applications and use BabelTalk as an indirect translator, as you said, into Aurora is amazing. And being able to bring down their spend, I don't know, 100x.
Explain that to me a second. You say that Telco uses a bunch of databases. I don't know anything about Telco because I tend to live in SaaS world in San Francisco, where if it can't be solved with software, it's not a real problem. I think of Telco as a whole bunch of networking equipment, a bunch of wires, and a bunch of surly people who miss their appointment dates. What are these companies using big databases for?
They have a lot of business applications on the IT side. So a really simple example for you and for everyone that probably doesn't know a lot about Telco. 4 years ago, I didn't know anything about Telco. I became the CEO of a publicly traded company in Canada that made charging software. And it wasn't like charging software to charge your phone. It was the telcos need to figure out a way how to monetize all the things that we do on our phone. Calling, texting, and mostly data pull downs. And so in the United States, we are a postpaid country, meaning we have high credit. And so if an individual subscriber, a customer, you and me, goes over our plan, they just bill us at the end of the period, right? You went over your data, we're going to tack on an extra $10. But the majority of the world is a prepaid situation, right? It almost acts like a debit card. So if you're out of minutes, if you're out of data, the phone stops working. And so the telco doesn't say, hey, we'll extend you, like in the United States, they let you keep downloading things and they'll just get you on the next bill. They don't know if the person's going to top up their minutes or data and, essentially reimburse them for the free allowance. And so they want that phone to basically not work. And it forces them to either go into a store or send a text and and buy some more minutes. And so all of that is really software, right? It sits super close to the network. And so what you were talking about, Corey, is the towers. And yes, it's a very hardware intensive situation. There is a software component, but on the back end, there is a lot of software that's running in the telco. There's obviously the call center software, that maybe doesn't work as well as we all would like to, because we're all super frustrated with calling into our telcos for help. But there's tons of business software out there that's helping them monetize all the things that we do, put out offers that are enticing that get us to stay with our telco. And there's this very important record that is created with every phone call. It's called the call data record, the CDR. Governments want their hands on this data, bad actors, and so it's precious data. It's almost as valuable as, say, banking account information. How much money do you have, and where is it located, and whatnot. So there's a lot of sensitivity in the telcos about putting this kind of data into the public cloud, running analytics on it, getting insights in terms of, it has a lot of information: who you called, where you were located, the duration of the call, kind of the kind of data that you're pulling down. And so it's obviously data that can be monetized. They worry about Google monetizing this data. They worry about Amazon doing something with this data and using it for their retail business. So there's a lot of, trepidation about moving their data up. And so that's what I do all day long, is like, hey, these are completely separate businesses. There's, encryption by default. There's 6 layers of security. And once you walk a telco exec through this, they really start to get it. And they're like, okay, I get what this is. But then the next thing is that they think of AWS as just a data center, just the hardware. They really don't understand the software that the hyperscalers are offering, like databases, like we'll talk about in a second, Aws Connect, call center, and just this tremendous opportunity for them to stop building all this stuff internally and just really stand on the shoulders of some great technologists, like the world's best technology firms in AWS and Google and Microsoft, and use it for their benefit. And so, they have tons of databases that are holding tons of CDR records and all of your failed customer requests and support tickets. They're just trying to keep you, entice you, build loyalty and steal subscribers from their competitors. And there's a lot of software there.
Gotcha. So a couple of things from the chat so far. The first is that apparently our levels are not even. One of us is louder than the other. I don't know if we can clean that up or not, but we certainly will in the replay. The other piece is that someone says, does AWS bad actor use S3? We'll have to ask them. I assume they were one of the cheesy corporate marketing videos they played during the keynote. Badum. Tis. So a common question people like to ask in every industry, and I'm curious if Telco asked this, is AWS coming to compete with us? Because Amazon's strategy is, of course, yes, they will do anything and everything. They're clearly going after databases, and let's face it, what I'm doing isn't new. There used to be people that would fix long-distance bills for big companies. They would go in and wind up unwinding them, and doing some deep special subject matter expertise, because the bills were incredibly complicated. AWS already competed with that in the world of complex bills, and now it's orders of magnitude worse than it ever was in telco. Does telco have something to fear from these companies, specifically AWS?
Oh, it's funny because there's this event that happens every year in telco called the Great Telco Debate, and I'm participating in it. It's held with Telecom TV. I have already pre-recorded my opening argument that, yes, you can trust the hyperscalers. But next week we're debating it live, and anyone who's listening that is curious about this, please join us. It's on the 10th. They totally worry about this a lot, and what I tell them is, could the hyperscalers come and take over telco? They absolutely could. I mean, they have the scale, they have the resources, they have the talent to go do it. But my next question is, would they? And my answer here is, I don't think they would, right? I mean, you got to really ask yourself, is it an adjacent business to what they already do? And these, for the most part, are software businesses. And telco is pretty hardware intensive still, right? They're still buying open, the radio access networks and towers and all this complication. It's a headache. The telcos are having a hard time monetizing it. I don't know why AWS or Google would want to enter that business. And, I was recently doing research on this. Google actually created a mobile virtual network operator, right, called GoogleFi. That was 5 years ago. No one worries about that. So I don't think they're competing with them. I think it's a, irrelevant worry. I think the bigger case is that this is a mega trend that telco can't ignore with public cloud, and they should embrace it and use it to their full advantage and get on the wave sooner rather than wait a long time.
The counterpoint to that is, Amazon did try getting into telco briefly, at least the end user device, with the Amazon Fire phone, which was widely considered to be a flop. And in typical Amazon fashion, they named it horribly. Oh, it's a device whose failure mode is to burn your house down. Let's call it Fire. Brilliant. Simply brilliant. But they are approaching it from ancillary ways, where they're brushing against what telcos tend to do. The clearest example of this that I've seen is, I guess, more legacy landline style telco than the modern everything is wireless, is Amazon Connect. It's not really my area. I don't see a whole lot of folks using it based upon the profile of companies I tend to work with. But for the people who are using it, they're saying a lot. They're making a lot of noise about it. Do you see it? Is it real? What is it? How's that working out?
Yeah, so Connect is really awesome because the way I understand AWS Connect is it's a call center software. And for the most part, these guys have call center software. You and I have been the lucky recipients of that experience, which has been, for the most part, very terrible. And I think what AWS's key insight is that call centers are missing this cloud component and machine learning. During COVID, we had this opportunity to see, I think AWS's data point was more than 5,000 companies switched to using AWS Connect and spinning up call centers and scaling up to 10,000, plus agents really quickly. That's insane, right? Those kinds of timescales in telco, they speak in terms of years, not days and months. And so in the SaaS world, we think of things being deployed in typically months, right? Download a free demo, get started with a free trial, and you just sort of grow from there. And that is unheard of in the telco world. And so what was really exciting about the Connect piece is that how rapidly AWS is adding features that telcos could use, right? They added this thing called Connect Wisdom, which allows you to connect to knowledge bases. And so that agent, while they're serving the subscriber, can, sort of start to pull in information that they don't have at their fingertips and share that and answer and resolve problems. They added this concept called customer profiles that pulls in kind of data from all different places, order history, sales, CRM, contact history, again, to kind of get a full picture about the person that they're talking to. The natural language processing stuff with contact lens, right? So you can sort of detect sentiment in people's sentences, like I'm about to switch unless you guys help me in 2 seconds.
Looking for specific keywords like unacceptable or I'm angry or 600 words. They're not allowed to put on a slide and keep their job. One other one that I thought was fascinating was the idea of using voice ID. I forget the exact formal name for it. It's an Amazon name and thus awful.
Yeah, I think they called it Connect. Yeah, it's voice ID. Yeah.
And the idea being that they can listen to you based upon what you've said before to them. And they in turn can say, oh, it's your voice print. It's definitely you, for authenticating that it's you. And I'm thinking, great, there's a bunch of machine learning stories around that. Maybe I could, I don't know, take a 3-hour keynote, which is an awful lot of one person talking, and feed it into those things and suddenly try to be them when I call and try and act as them to their bank or the hockey team that they may or may not own in their spare time.
We've all had those experiences where they're like, what's your mother's maiden name? What's your last 4 digits of your social? And you're just like just trying to get to the point where I can share with you what my problem is, because I don't want to be on this call. I want to get my answer. I want to get my problem solved. I want to get off the phone. And you go through those layers of, level 1, level 2. They won't advance you to someone technical. If you're like, you or me, we're pretty technical people. I know how to reboot my router. I know how to turn off my phone. I know how to reseat my SIM. Please get me someone very quickly that can help me with my problem, because I've read all your pages. I've troubleshot this problem myself. I don't want to have to start at level 0 and work my way up until someone really understands and realizes I'm not a moron. I know what I'm talking about, and really starts to help me. And I think cloud, machine learning, this natural language processing piece all coming together is going to make our experience better. So I'm like, please, Telco, start to adopt these awesome technologies, right? You guys are upgrading your software every 5 years, because it's integrated to 75 billion other applications. It's customized to high heaven. You can't upgrade because it takes literally years to upgrade software in telco. Please, can we get to these continuous integration, continuous delivery, so you can take advantage of these cool new features and like make my life and my mom's life a lot better? Because I'm tired of troubleshooting my parents' technical issues because they don't want to call their provider for help.
So there's a question here from the Twitch chat, which starts with, sorry if I missed this. Don't apologize. Ask your question. Are there companies that are really using Amazon Connect? And what feedback there that isn't marketing related? Like, of all the offerings this week sound amazing there, but is there actual momentum or adoption of AWS within the call center world? I don't have insight into that, do you?
So I'm obviously looking through a very telco lens, and so I'm looking for those telcos that are adopting AWS components in a real way. I think that there is a session, I think it's next week, with BT and OpenReach that's going to talk about their use of Connect. There's a case study on the AWS website. It's unnamed, but it's a UK provider, and I've sort of looked in other places and looked at announcements, and I think it's BT, and I think it's this case study. So I would look there and see what they say. I'm certainly going to attend that and listen in. I am always interested in how people, what's the real story. I love real stories. But at least this is a Google conference, but I know Verizon's using Google's version of the same thing and had some real results that were very impressive. And so, I think it's really interesting as these telcos look at the different hyperscaler offerings in the business application or ML or AI space, and then make their decision on which one is the best offering. I see AWS just watching the announcements come out of AWS and Andy Jassy's 3-hour live talk. It's just mammoth. It's just unbelievable how much stuff is coming out, how fast they're moving. It puts a lot of pressure on Google and Azure. Azure recently announced that they're building Azure for operators. They want to be the carrier grade cloud. AWS tends to not be that industry focused, at least for telco, they're not. And so it's really interesting to watch these cloud wars play out. They play out sort of on the horizontal plane in terms of features and functionality, but sort of that vertical plane with industries, right? Azure is going after telco in a big way, and let's see, how AWS responds.
Yeah, one of the reasons I love talking to you is that you have a very different perspective into companies that I know. Like, if you want me to come and talk about billing stuff or serverless bullshit, that's great. I am absolutely right there. But companies in your space are sort of a big blind spot for me. I don't see a lot of call center style work. Now, I will self-disclose this, that when I was 20 years old, I worked in a call center doing telemarketing because I'm that kind of asshole. And the problem that I see with some of these things is there's a capability from a management perspective of getting better insight into how different agents are performing, getting faster throughput and the rest. But it feels like in the wrong hands, this could turn into hell on earth for the people using it. You're never going to get away from bad management, but I'm curious what you see there.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot of great stories here, but I think you're right.
Well, not ones you can talk about in public anyway.
Well, there's, with Connect, I think, and these other tools that exist at the other hyperscalers, right? These chatbots, right? The natural language processing piece. There's a lot of hard problems to solve there. There's dialect issues, there's accents, obviously different languages, intonations, colloquialisms, just the way people talk in different parts of the world. People get really frustrated when that chatbot is stupid. Right? It gets really, it turns a bad situation actually worse.
It's clippy for telco. It looks like you're writing a letter. Yeah, it looks like you're trying to cancel. I will avoid helping you do that. Yeah.
right? And
Again, you're not gonna
people
be
took
busy
a broken
practicing,
phone
you
and
know?
then throw it out the window because they're just so frustrated with your shitty, sorry, can I cuss on this? With your super crappy, super crappy bot. And so I do think these projects have a high chance of failure if you're not really putting an intentional, thoughtful time into how we're constructing the bot, how we're, teaching it, how it's learning. And once those things work, it's amazing, right? Like, I think just out of telco, just as a normal person interacting with different websites and different vendors, when you have a problem, when you have a great experience, you're like, our bar is so low, we're like, this is going to suck because it's a bot and I can tell it's a bot or whatever. But when it's really good, you're like, wow, that was awesome. I didn't talk to anyone. I got my answer super fast, right? They sent me a link with, more data, and you're like, that's the world we're trying to get to, that really awesome experience. And I think telco has the worst NPS rating of all industries. It's like 2 or 3. There's no loyalty. And so they use these tricks to trap you, right? The contracts, the locked phones, right? Because they're not trapping you with just, you're not willingly a customer of these telcos. You're just like, I tolerate my telco, right? I have to have a telco. There's not one great one. And if T-Mobile in the United States, because we have mostly probably a US audience today, right? If you look at T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T, if one of those guys really emerged as having a super awesome, very 21st century experience, I think we would all flock to them in a second.
Yeah. Someone said in the chat they're from Canada. So are you. Wonderful. But a question that was just asked as well is that it's a no-brainer to use cloud, whichever one. I agree. There is no clear right cloud and wrong cloud unless we get into like the IBM tier. But for startups, but brick and mortar, okay, it's a bit different there. But the majority of orgs that you're seeing, you personally, DR, using Amazon, Aws Connect, are they new blood style companies, or are they some of the mammoths, like the Fortune 500? I have my own guesses as to that, but I have guesses. You have data.
No, so I have I'm such a nerd. I have a spreadsheet that tracks literally, I was looking at it today. It has the 3 hyperscalers. It actually has IBM on the list, but they're way over there on the side. And it's very empty over there. And then I kind of have what kind of announcements are we talking about? And you kind of see 2 big areas, which is sort of general big partnerships where it's not very specific. And then you have the edge announcements, and there's a lot of edge stuff. In the general announcements, it's very few and far between where people are being very specific about what they're using. I'll be honest, Azure says they have a lot of telco relationships, and they might, but I really see a lot of activity between AWS and Google. Google
they do.
tends
It's
to win.
Microsoft. Let's be serious. They sell Office to all of the telcos. That's the problem. It's impossible to say who's doing what and where.
Really
Proof of concept is not all of production runs on it.
Exactly. And so they do, even Google, when they announce their revenue numbers, they still include, and I think in Q4 they're going to strip them out, but they include G Suite numbers in their cloud numbers. And so it's kind of hard to figure out what's really going on in the cloud, and especially with telco. And so sometimes it's a generic announcement, we're going to resell cloud services and just sit on top of AWS or Google. Some of them are strategic alliances and very vague. There was a great example with Vodafone and analytics in November of 19 at Google Cloud Next London, back when we were meeting in person, and they're doing a really big project. And then, but probably the biggest announcement that I've seen that's moving in a real way is with Deutsche Telekom out of Germany. Sort of very quietly, they've gone from, I think, 89 to 13 data centers. They're trying to move 60% of their applications to the public cloud. They're doing on AWS and Azure. And they saw, and wait for this because this is a shocking number, triple-digit million euro savings annually by moving to the public cloud. It's huge.
That's big money. No matter what your standard is, that's big money. I know that a lot of people who watch this are Americans and don't know what a euro is, but trust me, it's a lot of money. So,
it's like $1.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty close to $1. It's pretty close to $1.
Yeah.
Like I kind of follow the.
It's been a weird year. I didn't know if I were to peg that. Yeah. So
it's about $1. It's close to $1.
Okay. Another question: the data sovereignty challenges that are the Aster believes that they're going to be addressed by governments in the next few years, either through hyperscalers expanding regions everywhere, or governments allowing data to be stored in specific countries. What steps can I take now to prepare? Good question.
Ooh, that's a super good question. That's someone who's really thinking about this. That might be a telco person. If you're a telco person, tell us, because that sounds like a very telco-y question. But exactly. So I think, Corey, you're exactly right. I think countries will start to modify their regulations to make it easier to use the public cloud and use the hyperscalers. I think also the hyperscalers will be in more locations, right? You wrote a blog very recently about the new Hyderabad, India AWS data center, and so they continue to plot out and put more regions out there. I think your estimate was close to $1 billion of investment per availability zone, about $3 billion. I think the number is 2.8 per data center, which is freaking insane. But what I think telcos can do right now is today the software at a telco, I mean, can I do like a yoga move? Right, like it's completely intertwined, it's completely integrated. Like imagine the morass that you have of like lifting out one application that's like integrated to like 30 other ones. Telcos need to eliminate all their customizations. They need to rationalize all the applications they have. They need to start to containerize, modernize, and get that ready. You can use things like Outposts today from AWS that gives you the idea of AWS just hyper locally in your own data center, and start to run workloads on that so that when your data regulations lift or there's a data center that you can use, it's a push of a button and you can move it. And that's what I would be doing if I were a telco or any organization that hasn't started that move and thinks they're dealing with data issues like telcos deal with.
So, yeah, you hold it, by the way. The question asker was, in fact, a telco tech exec consultant. So, yeah, you know your people. Last question, I promise. Please, ask all the questions you want. What we're here to do.
Ask tons of questions. That's what I'm here for.
Exactly.
It's Friday afternoon, right? Let's do it.
Yeah. So have there been any talks with any of the cloud vendors with the group that guy Elon is running with Starlink, or is it too early to peek behind that particular curtain? In other words, like the idea of Starlink being tied into a public cloud vendor. It's a good question. Anyone with actual knowledge of that is not going to be able to talk about it, but I wonder if you heard any scuttlebutt.
Well, whoever's asking this, I would look at Azure for space. I think they're trying to do something with Starlink. It's not off the top of my fingers, and maybe, I think, Corey, you have googly fingers and you can Google really fast. But I think Azure for space is, again, Microsoft's really going after the telco business, and Starlink, so Starlink, for people who don't know, is Elon Musk's low Earth orbit satellites that's really trying to cover rural areas, right? And it's creating this mesh of satellites. He recently was announced in a public beta, like maybe about a month ago. It's like $100 a month, but there's a couple of stories out there about like firefighters in Washington, the state, that don't have coverage in areas, and so they're part of the beta group that's trying it. But I think Microsoft is experimenting with data centers in space. I interviewed Rick Liviano from Microsoft on my podcast. I think it's episode maybe 5 or 6, if you guys want to check out the Telco in 20 podcast. And they're building, putting data centers in oceans to experiment with sort of that kind of environment where there's 0 humans that can touch it. And they found out that there was like 8x less errors and issues in the data center that was like underwater. And I think they're getting ready for space data centers. And so I'm working on my like year-end predictions for telco. And I think 2 days ago, Elon Musk said that he thinks humans will be on Mars in 6 years, maybe 4. And telco moves so slow. My question to telco is, will we be in the public cloud before there's humans on Mars? And actually, it's a toss-up. And you think that would be a no-brainer and super easy, but there might be humans on Mars before telco decides it's okay to use the public cloud. And so I'm here to like really work on that and really evangelize and convince you, go to the public cloud. It's awesome. It's going to be great.
Are you a partisan in that? Do you care which public cloud a telco goes to?
I don't. When I was CEO of Optiva, I was a Google girl, and that was because very specifically I had a charging product that, that's that example that I was telling you about, trying to figure out how much to charge each subscriber for the transactions that they do. And that's a very database intensive application. It's a very not to be sort of technical, but it's a write-intensive application. And so I wanted to move off of Oracle, and I wanted to move to public cloud. I wanted a database that was 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper. I actually looked at Aurora first because I was most familiar with AWS, but Google Cloud Spanner was like a really great database for this problem. And so I was a big Google girl. And so, just AWS is just going to be really hard to compete with. They're putting, like I said a couple minutes ago, they're really putting their boot on the neck of the other two big guys. It's going to be hard to beat them. They just are coming out with, the chips, the databases, the database offerings, Aws Connect, the machine learning, the AI, and then the wavelength stuff. It's going to be hard to beat them. So it kind of depends on where you are and what your needs are and what the application, but I think you should really look at all those things and then make the best decision based on that.
So a follow-up question here is someone asked, is AWS Outposts something that telco world would be interested in?
I think so, right? I think...
to my understanding, a lot of telcos will buy just about anything as long as you can shove it into a rack.
They will. I don't, again, my end goal for telco is the public cloud, right? So let's be super clear. That's the end destination. I am not really interested in helping you build a private cloud with a bunch of outposts. You can, but that wouldn't be my recommendation.
Verizon Public Cloud, something that they launched years ago, turned it off for an entire weekend for maintenance or cleaning or Christ knows what. First, their customers were upset, and then they weren't their customers anymore, and then they shut down Verizon Public Cloud. That feels like what the fate of most private clouds is, even without going public with them.
So I was speaking to someone in Bolivia a couple of weeks ago, and he believes he falls under these data sovereignty rules, that he can't move his data out of the country. And there's not a hyperscaler in Bolivia. I don't think it's like on the next, it's not on the next 5 top hot areas to put a data center. And so his conclusion was to build his own public cloud because they want to have a public cloud offering to their enterprise customers and sell public cloud to their customers. And I'm like, oh my God, can I convince you how much of a bad idea that is? And it was interesting because you had just put out your blog post, and so I used your data points about it's about $1 billion. Let's just assume they do one availability zone, and they do all the security and all the stuff you got to do. And I think the key here is they sort of look at it as it's just hardware. I'm just managing racks. But I think the difference with the hyperscalers is that the software investment that they have done, the software they're giving us, the dev tools, the dev environments, the documentation. You make fun of their arcane naming conventions and how complicated some of their descriptions are and the pages are. But at the end of the day, it's pretty easy to log in and start using the software. You didn't have to build it. Now, these guys that are thinking about building their own public clouds, I'm like, you're insane. Please don't do it. But if you're going to do it, use Outposts, right? Start to use the stuff that is available, kind of get these little mini AWSs in your own data center, and at least use that. And that's kind of my last ditch resort. Just don't try to go build it on your own. You just really don't even know. Imagine getting top talent in Bolivia compared to AWS, Google, and Microsoft. You just can't get awesome cloud talent when you're competing against these super, sexy names of where to work. So I'm like, Mr. Bolivia guy, don't build your own
And
public
they're
cloud.
opening offices in basically everywhere between the three of them, and there's always going to be opportunities to wind up working for those folks.
Yeah.
One area I want to talk about a little bit is 5G. According to technology providers, it is the wave of the future. At least according to the tech companies, it also causes COVID, according to Facebook. So AWS has done something interesting with the 5G stuff, where they didn't build anything directly, but they did their wavelength thing, where they drop equipment, I believe it's outposts, into a bunch of cities partnered with Telco, and then you can run applications on them. It seems weird to me because I come from an old world where the idea of the bottleneck is between the cell phone and the tower, not the tower and the data center. It seems like this is rapidly changing that in its head. Can you help me understand what the hell people are doing with this?
Well, that's exactly what 5G has done, right? It's solved that problem about the speed between the cell phone and the tower. And so now there's all these applications like gaming on your phone while you're, at the park,
while you're driving is always the way it works.
While you're driving. Please don't. I mean, my kids do that, actually. They do play games in the backseat while I'm driving them around.
Microsoft Teams this past week officially announced that you can now have Microsoft Teams support on Apple Carplay. Because according to Microsoft, there is no such thing as time off the clock. Enjoy smashing into traffic because someone on Teams is being annoying.
I do meetings in the car a lot, and so I'm wondering, I mean, you would get a look, that would be a weird look. I'd be like looking there, and it'd be kind of strange to have a Teams, but that's interesting. But yeah, so it used to be this latency between the phone and the tower, and you couldn't do things while you were on, LTE away from a Wi-Fi, away from high bandwidth. But with 5G, that's been solved. And so there's all these, okay, what are the cool things we can do? Well, the next new problem is exactly as you described. It's a latency between the tower and the data center. And so Wavelength is software. Again, I think it's built on Outpost. I have not played with it, but I think Jeff Barr did he did like a Twitch or a YouTube stream where he built a Wavelength application like in 30 minutes and filmed it. I mean, now he's like, number 3 guy at AWS.
He's a wizard, so there is that.
But he is a wizard, but I retweeted it, and I got a lot of retweets on my Twitter feed. It was just like how easy it was to build a Wavelength application. And so, again, I think it's kind of like AWS, hyper-localized next to a tower to bring compute capability. And it's really the software, right? It's not talking about the radio access network. It's not the stuff sitting on the tower. It's just bringing this like little baby data center super close to the tower to bring, I think, mostly compute so that you can do those high intensive applications, reduce the latency, and the subscriber experience is acceptable for gaming or video or whatever you need to do wherever you are, even in rural areas.
So it feels like it's, at least my cynical approach, it's AWS's way of keeping abreast of what's going on in the 5G world without having to make significant investment past a few racks that they wind up throwing out to various locations. And they're expanding now to a bunch of different places. I think they announced their first international expansion for that as well. The goal,
like 7
I think,
cities
is for them to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is early days. There's this technologist blogger, I think his name is Roy Chua. I don't know him personally, but I stumbled across a little drive test that he did where he got a Verizon 5G phone, and he went to San Francisco. I think he probably lives in San Francisco. It's one of the most connected cities in the world. It's super close to data centers of AWS. And Verizon is a Wavelength customer of AWS, and San Francisco is a city. And he tested basically this idea of gaming. Just drove around, right? He went to Oakland, he went to South Bay, he went all over the place trying to do cool stuff and testing kind of the experience. I don't know if it was so much a test of Wavelength as a test of 5G speeds in different parts. I need to go read his blog one more time.
I'm here in San Francisco, not too far from downtown, and I get basically LTE coverage here. Oh, well.
Yeah. So it's still, I mean, it's kind of, and if I follow all the T-Mobile executives, and they're constantly pew, 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 shooting barbs at at Verizon and AT&T for having hashtag fake 5G. We're the only ones with real 5G. But, you know, so it's early days. I think there's 7 wavelength cities, 5 for sure, 2 recently announced, and the 3 international locations that they announced with reInvent, like you said, Japan, South Korea, and London. The Asian countries tend to be actually the furthest ahead on 5G. They've been doing it for, I want to say, almost close to a year now. They're way, you know, the United States always thinks that we're like first, but it's actually Asia that's been first on rolling out 5G. So, you know, they're partnering with KDDI in Japan. That's one of the biggest providers there. And so, I think it's SK Telecom maybe in South Korea. So let's see how it goes. It's early days, but I think the idea is really awesome. They're sort of bringing the power of the data center. They're not building a data center. It's just like a little baby rack, and it's bringing it literally close to the tower so that the users have an awesome experience. So we'll see.
Yeah, someone just pointed out the U.S. is first only in military spending and not much else. I think that's a little unfair.
Oh no, we're first in COVID cases too.
Rates.
No, but we're number 1 in COVID cases. We have a new number 1.
Cases, incarceration rates, a whole bunch of things that we are number 1 in.
We are awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go USA.
The USA is the best country in the world. Just ask anyone who's never been anywhere else. So if you had a message for telcos out there who are considering the cloud, again, you're not going to be able to drive a sea change with one statement, but what would you encourage them to start with? Because I've got to admit, looking at the cloud when I first started, it was incredibly overwhelming. Yeah. There were too many AWS services to keep track of. There were 12. Now there's way more than that. It is completely untenable for any person to keep in their head. Where would you tell them to start? What's the most realistic way to approach this from their
leaders? Yeah, so for leaders, I think Andy Jassy, both last year and this year, had a really similar intro statement in terms of setting aggressive top-down goals around moving to the public cloud. And what I would do is start with a survey of the applications that you have running and bucket them into easy, medium, and hard to move to the public cloud. And set a goal of, let's move 10 applications this month to the public cloud. And I would probably start with the easy bucket. There's probably some websites or mobile apps or just like baby little applications. They're not mission critical, you know, whatever it is. Pick 10 and move 10. And the next month, see if you can double it. And see if you can double it after that. And I think you just get on this treadmill, and you're going to get to the point where you're like, shit, this is super hard, or it's legacy, it's a mainframe or COBOL application. We don't know what to do. Raise your hand and ask for help, right? I can help. I have technologists that can come in and refactor that. And there's a lot of organizations out there, you know, the 7 Rs, the 5 Rs, everyone has their, you know, sort of move to the cloud framework. But don't just dip your toe in the water. Don't just experiment. Do something meaningful. Pick 10 apps, get them to the public cloud. And it doesn't really matter. Pick a hyperscaler, anyone you like, start doing it. You got to start building that muscle in your organization of how to manage bills, how to look at the technology, how it works. Start doing it.
Most important step is always the next one. DR, thank you so much for taking the time to darken my doorstep, such as it is. If people want to hear more from you, about you, avoid you, etc., where can they find you?
It's kind of hard to avoid me. I'm kind of everywhere these days. But follow me on Twitter. I'm TelcoDR. My website, TelcoDR.com. My podcast, Telco in 20. I'm hilarious. I'm as funny as I am right here, but on that thing. And then I have a newsletter, the Telco in 20 newsletter. You can find all this stuff on my website. And I actually have a vanity phone number. You can WhatsApp me at 925-TelcoDR. So give me a call, send me a text.
I like that. Yeah, people don't realize this, but I do have a vanity phone number as well. You can call me toll-free at 833-AWS-BILL. I'm not kidding. I await my cease and desist.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
This is super fun. Thank you, Corey.
No, thank you.
It was super fun. Thank you so much.
Of course. And thank you, everyone, for watching, listening, and hurling questions at us.